What's up, y'all? My name is JR, and for those of you who don't already know, I'm a huge movie and TV nerd. If you're new here, I appreciate you taking the time to check out my channel. I hope you consider sticking around and joining the film community I'm trying to build here on YouTube. So in today's video, I'm going to be giving a recap, reaction, analysis, and review of the first episode in the Netflix mystery thriller television series, Wayward. And just so you guys know, this video will contain spoilers, so if for some reason you haven't gotten around to watching the first episode of this series yet, and you don't want to know anything that happens in it, you might want to exit this video now. And with that being said, no more wasting time. Let's get into it. Wayward is a mystery thriller limited series from Mae Martin for Netflix about two students who join forces with a newly local police officer unearthing the town's dark and deeply rooted secrets after an escape attempt from an academy for so-called troubled teens. The series stars Mae Martin, Sarah Gadon, Olivia Allen Lind, Sydney Topliff, Brandon J. McLaren, Tatiana Jones, Isolde Ardies, Joshua Close, and Toni Collette. The series was released on Netflix on September 25th of 2025, featuring all 8 episodes of the miniseries being released all at the same time. And at the time of the making of this video, the series has a 73% on Rotten Tomatoes, with its popcorn meter currently sitting at 53%. The series has a Metascore of 71 on Metacritic based on 17 critic reviews, with a user score of 5.8 based on 9 user ratings. And finally, the series has a 5.9 out of 10 on IMDb with just over 1,500 ratings. So, this show wasn't originally on my list of shows to cover. I'll be honest with you guys about that. But I saw it on Netflix just earlier today while I was perusing, and I can also admit that the show looked like it could be fun. That, and I saw that Toni Collette was starring, so I figured I'd give it a shot. And after the first episode, I thought it might actually be worth covering, not as a complete breakdown video, but more like a recap, reaction, analysis, and review type video, seeing as how I'm trying to diversify the content that I make for you guys on this channel. So that's why I ultimately decided to do this. Just to kind of give you guys a little bit of an insight, the breakdown videos that I do are where I go through the episode and I literally take note of everything, even down to the dialogue, word for word, what gets said, what's important to remember, something that appears on screen that we need to remember, all that. And so because of that fact, it can sometimes take me 3 or 4 days to make a breakdown video. Recap videos are a little bit shorter, a lot shorter actually, and I can get those done in a day. You know what I mean? Because we don't get into all of the small writing and everything, beat for beat, plot for plot, plot point for plot point, word for word. So with this show, I just kind of figured I would take a stab at Wayward, see what you guys think. And, you know, look, if the video does well and you guys want me to do the rest of the episodes, I'll do them. If you've been here with me for a while, you know that's kind of how I work. I go off of what you guys want to see me do. I do what I like because that makes the videos easier to make. But I also, you know, try to pay attention to what you guys enjoy watching and doing more of that. So if you guys like this video, make sure you smash that like button. Make sure we get the views up, and I'll go by that. And if this works out, I'll continue making them until you guys don't watch them anymore. Okay, so now that that's out the way, Episode 1, entitled Tall Pines, starts in 2003 with a student that we come to find out is named Riley frantically escaping Tall Pines Academy, a controversial school for troubled teens in Tall Pines, Vermont, as we hear a female voice reciting instructions to him. Now, it's not clear if this is over the loudspeakers that are located outside or if this is just in his head. But nevertheless, he hops a fence, continues into the woods, and finally jumps in a pretty dirty lake where he sees a door at the bottom before letting out a scream in terror. Now, in Toronto, we meet best friends Layla and Abby, and they're on a rooftop of their high school getting baked, not fried. And at this point, we learn that Abby is dyslexic and that her father thinks of her as a parasite, which is pretty hard to hear your dad say to you as a teenager. But the girls end up getting caught by a guidance counselor. And after he shows some empathy for the recent passing of Layla's sister, he suggests Tall Pines Academy in Vermont to her specifically, not her friend, but her, as an alternative educational opportunity. And he kind of insinuates that the train has already left the station in that regard, that her mom is already on board. So he's kind of already put this in motion due to the fact that she's missed so much class this semester and that she's just going to fail all these classes. And he tells her that is unless she can turn her grades around by the end of the year, which seems unlikely in his opinion. Meanwhile, in Tall Pines, Vermont, troubled police officer Alex Dempsey and his, notice I said his, pregnant wife Laura moved to town. And it's at this point that we learn that Laura is a former student of the academy and has a deep, unresolved connection with its leader. And so, there's that, right? Now, back in Toronto, Abby struggles with being dyslexic and having a father who seems to be perpetually disappointed in her choice to be friends with Layla. He calls her a drug dealer, a drug addict, and a criminal, essentially. And also with her overall academic performance, explaining that if she fails her finals at the end of the year, that drastic action will be taken, right? Now, back in Tall Pines, Alex quickly becomes suspicious of the school and the town's secretive nature, especially after encountering Riley, the teenager, fleeing through the woods and seeing other strange interactions between the inhabitants of said town. Now, back in Toronto, Layla and Abby come up with a plan to break into their school after hours and steal copies of their upcoming exam so they can ace it because, Layla expresses that she might have to go to this school. Of course, Abby doesn't want to see her go. So this is how this whole thing comes about. Now, back in Tall Pines, Alex discovers weird goings-on in the basement of the house they're living in, a house that's owned by Evelyn, the founder of Tall Pines Academy. And the next day, she meets Evelyn when she comes in to help local police locate Riley, the runaway teen. Now, back in Toronto, the girls break into the school with another male student's help. They made this dude hide in the lockers to let them into the school. What a simp. They take mushrooms first and then make copies of their upcoming exam before Layla ultimately questions their friendship, because she heard what Abby's father said about her and that she's dragging, Abby down. And don't forget, her guidance counselor said the same thing. And then Layla ultimately leaves. And when she leaves, it kind of looks like a goodbye. You know what I'm saying? Because, again, I think that Layla understands that she's probably going to this academy no matter what. And it's really Abby that wanted to steal the test to help her not be shipped off because she needs her. Now, when Abby arrives home, she goes to bed, but is awakened in the night and sent to Tall Pines Academy as punishment, forcefully, I might add. Now, in Tall Pines, Alex and Laura are awakened in the night by an intruder who turns out to be Riley. He and Alex engage in a physical confrontation that ends with Riley being stabbed by him in self-defense. And keep in mind that they had all went out and searched for Riley in the woods, the police did, and nobody could find him, and that's because he was at the crib, you feel me? And the episode ends with Abby arriving at the school where she is welcomed to Tall Pines by Evelyn. And she seems terrified as she takes in her strange new surroundings. Now, one of the first things I noticed was that this story takes place in 2003, and I wondered originally what the significance of the story taking place in the past would be. But after kind of doing some digging, I see that, the whole Wayward teen fad, if you will, was an early 2000s thing. I mean, probably a little bit earlier than that, but it kind of phased out in the early 2000s. And so that's the reason for this story taking place in 2003. And there's a lot of old references in this show, from Discmans to old cars and even an abundance of vintage T-shirts. Not like a character wearing one ironically, but like the shirt is currently in fashion. My point is that this show leans heavily on nostalgia, and I'm always down for that, in fairly small doses. I really liked how Stranger Things kind of brought back, the nostalgic feel in that particular show. Now, I thought the casting overall was just okay. But it looks like this show was filmed in Canada, so that might be why it's chock full of actors I've never really heard of outside of Colette. You know what I mean? Well, that and a lot of the main characters appear to be queer. Of course, Alex identifies as a he, so we know that Alex is queer, and that makes Laura queer too. But I also feel like Abby might be thinking she could be queer, and I get the sense that Layla might be queer as well. But again, I've only watched the first episode, so don't hold me to that. We'll kind of see how it all shakes out, right? And because of that fact, I thought the acting in this episode was just okay, right? It was serviceable, right? It does the job. Like no real outstanding stuff, but it does the job. Colette obviously is carrying this thing. And I also thought that Olivia Allen Lynn was pretty good. And, she was asked to do a lot, mostly because of the nature of her character. But after Colette, she's got the second biggest pail of water to carry throughout the remainder of this series, in my opinion. And in my opinion, so far, she's doing a pretty good job. Now, I thought the smaller writing was serviceable, again, full of conversational dialogue, which you guys know if you've been here with me, I'm always on the side of conversational dialogue instead of that other stuff, right? And especially given the character and the story, again, I think Lynn does the most with what she's given in that regard. But again, I think she's also given the most to work with from a writing perspective, certainly in the way of dialogue. You know what I mean? I like that the writers chose to vacillate between the two stories fairly evenly, right? In order to give both of these stories in this particular episode equal weight, right? I think this is done because the storylines are sure to merge into one once the setup of the overall series is done. I also think the writers did a pretty good job of creating the mystery that will unfold over the course of the series, and that's going to be something that's going to be really, really, really important in a way that makes you truly want to know more, right? And speaking of knowing more, the ultimate success or failure in my eyes of the series as a whole, notice I said as a whole, will come down to the twist in the penultimate episode and what that ultimately turns out to be as we make our way into the finale and what I would assume would be the end of this miniseries. It's being posited as a miniseries, so I assume there's not going to be a season 2, even though these days you're just not sure, because if this thing gets enough views, they'll retcon a whole bunch of stuff to make a season 2, so we'll just have to wait and see about that. And for like a little extra credit, you know what I'm saying? I kind of loved how the gray van was just looming after Layla's meeting with her guidance counselor, and he told her, hey, Tall Pines, the train has already left the station, as in, I've already set this up. Your mother has already said yes. So when you see the gray van kind of following Layla and Abby around, you kind of go, oh, they about to get snatched, right? I thought that was kind of funny. Not that I think abduction is funny, but just the way that the van is just following them around the town or whatever, and they're not even aware of it, even though, Layla goes to great lengths to tell Abby, hey, I've heard of these places and they just steal you. You know what I'm saying? And you think that Layla's going to be the one to get snatched up, but it ends up being Abby. And I thought that was an interesting kind of turn of events, subverting expectations in a positive way. You know what I mean? And I also think, ultimately, extra credit again, the showrunner's choice of location perfectly support the story that we're being told, which is a truly underrated part of making content at this level, especially given that the story takes place in 2 different cities, in 2 different countries, and at least for now. Now, as for analysis, the writing focuses on dual narratives, like I've already said, with the teaser being Riley's escape from Tall Pines and ultimately going for a swim. And this teaser lasts about 2 minutes and 15 seconds. We know that this is the teaser first because it happens before the title. I always tell you guys that's the easiest way to know if something's a teaser. There's a cold open. Whatever happens before the title is typically the teaser. Second, it only lasts a couple of minutes, which teasers, 2 to 3 minutes is typically what a teaser. I mean, you can have one as short as 30 seconds, but typically 2 to 3 minutes, which this falls perfectly into. And third, it perfectly teases what we can expect from this show moving forward, which is paramount, especially in a pilot teaser. Now, the first act starts in Toronto with the introduction of Abby and Layla on the roof, getting baked, not fried, and Layla being presented with the opportunity to go to Tall Pines, in America. I don't know if you want to call it an opportunity or not, but, Doesn't seem like she really wants to do that, but, I digress. And it goes on to include Alex and Laura arriving in Tall Pines, and it ends with Alex and Laura, and it goes on to include Alex and Laura settling into their new home. Also, back in Toronto, we see Abby and Layla's walk home from school encompasses the argument between Abby and her dad. Layla then arriving at her house to a mother who apparently can't be bothered. But maybe this is something that's going on because, if Layla's sister died, that means her mother's daughter died. So maybe her mom's in some kind of depression. And so ultimately Layla just goes upstairs and does drugs. And this is the end of the first act, right? And it lasts about 12 minutes and 45 seconds. And the primary purpose of Act 1 is to essentially set up the story, right? Just like it would be, in the setup section of a movie. This is where we're introduced to the main characters, and in this case, that would include Abby, Layla, Alex, and Laura. It's funny how both of those are AL and AL. And here, we're also introduced to their world as it exists before the inciting incident happens, right? That being the thing that changes everything for them. Here, we should be made to understand the characters' motivations, their goals, and their initial conflicts. In this story, we see that Abby and Layla want to move to Vancouver and live off the grid, right? And they also have parents that they seem to want to get away from. Again, Abby, because they care too much about her without seeming to care at all for her. And Layla for having a mom that doesn't seem to care about her at all, or anything for that matter, right? And as for Alex and Laura, they simply want to get away from Alex's past transgression as a police officer in Detroit. An excessive force complaint, right? They also appear to want to have lived a simpler life, which is why they moved back to Tall Pines, which is where Laura is ultimately from. And, Alex kind of has this "I'm sorry I failed you" kind of thing that happens, but Laura tells her, "Hey, it's all good. Like, this is fine. We're good." And so, we also get the overall theme of the story we're being told here. The main theme explores the insidious nature of the troubled teen industry, right? That being people and the groups who made money off of, intergenerational trauma of teenagers, right? You saw like on Dr. Phil, had shows like that. And Steve, was it Steve Wilkos? Was that it? That had shows like that where the really bad, Dr. Phil had to Catch Me Outside, girl. You know what I'm saying? If y'all remember that. But just imagine if she had been sent someplace to kind of get right. You know what I'm saying? And a lot of that did happen in the 90s and the early 2000s. And so that's kind of what the overall theme of this story is. Now, the second act starts with Alex preparing for work as Laura makes breakfast from items mysteriously left in a basket on their front porch. It also includes Alex meeting her partner and finding Riley's, running through the woods. Abby and Layla making a plan to steal copies of their upcoming exam, and Alex searching the basement of their new home, to find the green door painted on the wall. So that's the second green door we've seen. And the second act lasts about 13 minutes and 6 seconds. So again, right there, just shy of being in the sweet spot, right? In a show like this, each act should be about 15 minutes. I tell you guys that the sweet spot is 90 minutes, 90 seconds before, and up to 90 seconds before, and up to 90 seconds past the 15-minute mark. So just a little outside the sweet spot, but it's all good, right? Now, in Act 3, we finally meet, Evelyn in the flesh, when she comes in and speaks to police about Riley. It also includes Abby arguing with her parents in front of company. And her dad did her dirty in that scene, man. I really felt bad for her in that scene because it was just her father was just doing the absolute most. But the group searching the woods for Riley and being unable to find him. The girls ultimately breaking into the school, getting high, baked not fried, and then stealing the exam copies. Abby then coming home and getting kidnapped by Gray Van Incorporated, and ultimately Riley entering Alex and Laura's home and getting stabbed by Alex in self-defense. Now, Act 3 is a little long. It lasts about 18 minutes and 10 seconds, which that's a good little bit. That's over 3 minutes past 15. It's not the end of the world, but you just kind of go, if you can help that, you don't want that. But again, I think in this particular case, it works just fine. And the third act is typically when the characters find their lowest point, right? Now, in the second act, for contrast, there may have been some general hope, but the third act kind of shows up and crushes that hope. You know what I'm saying? And a new or an evolved conflict kind of takes shape, replacing it. That being, Abby's abduction. Like, they got a much bigger problem now, right, than a test they were trying to cheat on. In layman's terms, the plan that they had, it fails miserably, right? And we get that here. And then lastly, we have the episode's tag, that being Abby arriving at Tall Pines and having Evelyn welcome her in seemingly ominous fashion, right? And having her kind of look around like, what the fuck, right? And the tag is usually the quick section meant to present a cliffhanger, and it usually works to kind of tease what's to come in the next episode, or sometimes even the remainder of the series, or even both, right? And most TV shows have tags, and so that's what this section of the episode was. Now, overall, I give this episode, hear what I said, the episode, a 90% or a 9.0 out of 10 if you're thinking IMDb score. Essentially, an A as a letter grade. Look, guys, I couldn't find a whole lot wrong with this first episode from a narrative perspective, right? I know the aggregate scores are kind of low, but I people don't like shows for all kinds of reasons, like I told you guys. But this show is quirky, it's funny in spurts, and it's downright whimsical at times, right? And that's the strength of Wayward so far, right? It's a mystery thriller written in the vein of a dark comedy. It's a show that doesn't seem to take itself too seriously, and because of that fact, it can get away with some things that a drama maybe couldn't. And after watching and analyzing this episode, again, just this episode, I am truly interested in what else this story has to offer moving forward. And when you add on top of that Netflix, typically favoring the binge model, release all 8 episodes at once, I'd be more than happy to knock this out in a day or two. And you can't always say that about these TV shows, right? I say all of that to say that having only watched the pilot at the time of the making of this video, I think that this show has been fairly pristine so far from a narrative perspective, despite the low scores on the aggregate sites, right? I think that might just come down to the fact that not a lot of people have seen this show yet. And so maybe the aggregate scores are going to balance out here as we keep going, because the critic scores are okay. It's the audience scores that kind of leave a lot to be desired, at least at this point. Also, keep in mind, guys, that I am a screenwriter first. So I've always told you guys my scores heavily rely on the strength of the narrative more than the other parts of the content. So, a lot of people will hit me up and go, oh, you're crazy because I love this actor, or I hated that actor or this character. And I go, what does that have to do with the narrative strength of the story we're being told? I always tell people that narrative. That's what my channel is about. So with that being the case, I think this show is a definite binge watch for those people who might be looking for something new and interesting to take in. But what do you guys think? Have you had a chance to watch the first episode of Wayward yet? If you have, what did you think of the first 50 minutes or so of this story? How do you feel about the main character so far? Which character is your favorite? Let me know in the comments. And for those of you that might be new to the channel, be sure to like and share this video. If you really like the content, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. That way you'll be notified whenever I drop a new video. You can also now support the channel by leaving a super thanks. If you should be so inclined, I'd greatly appreciate it. Also, feel free to subscribe to my new reaction and reviews channel and my new shorts channel for additional content. The links are in the description. In addition to that, be sure to go and check out themadScreenwriter.com for more television and film reviews and info on my upcoming film projects. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. I got screenplays to write, and I'll catch y'all on the next video.